Welcome back to Sports Rule Pod. I'm Nick Elam. Here we explore innovations in sports and the journeys of individuals who make sports great. You can find Sports Rule Pod on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon Music. And there are many ways to engage with the podcast. You can do so by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or YouTube, X, or Instagram @sportsrulepod. In the interview segment today, we're joined by Corey Parchman, a man who truly has done it all. Not only a former NFL player, but also the founder and the CEO of Corpas Holdings and the founder of the Miniman Pre-K Leadership Academy in Indianapolis and the author of the IVF Playbook for Men. In the innovation segment, we take a look at the 4-point field goal in football, which is something that has not just in theory anymore, it's actually been implemented as of 2026. And in the next to last segment, we revisit one of the most controversial endings to any sporting event of all time, the 1972 Olympic gold medal game in men's basketball. Let's get to it. We are so fortunate to be joined today by Corey Parchman. He is a former pro wide receiver, also the CEO of Corpas Holdings, and the founder of Miniman Pre-K Leadership Academy in Indianapolis. Corey, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me, Nick. I really appreciate it.
Now, there have been many chapters to your career, and I'd like to start with the football chapter of your career. Now, in college football, your senior year at Ball State University was in 2001. Let's pick it up from there. Can you share where your football journey went from there?
Great. Well, I think that any college athlete, their dream is like post colleges to go to the NFL. And of course, that was my dream also. The dream also is often to get drafted. Unfortunately, I wasn't drafted, but there's always opportunity. So after my senior year at Ball State in April, I was picked up by the Jacksonville Jaguars, the undrafted free agent. They gave me a call probably about 30 minutes after the draft. It was Jacksonville and Green Bay and New England called. And Jacksonville needed a kick returner. So I thought that'd be the best fit for me as far as the NFL goes. So I was undrafted free agent by the Jacksonville Jaguars, which was an amazing experience.
Do you remember who it was specifically who reached out to you from the Jaguars?
No, I blacked out, so have no clue who it was.
So
I knew who it was.
your-
It wasn't Tom Coughlin. I know that. So
So take us through a little bit of your time with the Jaguars and where your career went from there.
yeah. Jaguars was an amazing experience. It was my first experience in the NFL. I think it really didn't hit me that I was in the NFL until we were stretching, and the guy in front of me with his helmet on had the NFL sticker on the back. I was like, wow, I made it. But quickly you realize that, making it doesn't mean you made it, especially an undrafted free agent. So with that being said, the contracts are guaranteed, the money's not guaranteed. You're just trying to hang on and make the roster as best way you can. So I was a special teams guy. I love playing wide out, but I learned quickly that the way I was going to make this roster is stick around with the special teams. So that's what I did. I was on the kick return, punt return, field goal unit, field goal block unit, kickoff team, kickoff return team. Because as an undrafted guy, they already pretty much have their wide out set. They had 3 starters already in place, and you're just trying to hang on and be, that extra guy. So ended up making the practice squad, which is beneficial. And then the last 3 games of the year, I became active with Jacksonville. So an amazing experience to be a part of.
And then after Jacksonville, where was your next stop in your football
Yeah,
career?
so I leave Jacksonville and I spent a little time with the St. Louis Rams. Once again, NFL, it's a machine, and they brought me in the kick returner and wide out, but they ended up drafting a guy in the second and third round. They were both wide out kick returners. Plus, they had 2 starters. They had Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce. So you kind of realize then the writing's on the wall. So ended up getting released from there. Went to Oakland to the Raiders. They signed me maybe about a month or 2 later before camp started. Go to camp with Oakland, doing a great job in camp, put up some numbers. And right before the first preseason game, I tripped with a DB and I dislocated my shoulder. So I'm out for the year. So that was my experience after Jacksonville. And then shortly after that, I ended up signing with the Green Bay Packers and finishing up with the Packers.
Now, I'm curious what your fondest memory is in your time in pro football. I'm sure it probably wasn't this dislocated shoulder.
Man, actually, the entire experience was like, I joke all the time. I say it all the time. The NFL mean not for long. NFL. So I didn't know how long I was going to be there. So I just collected. Wherever I went, I collected something. So it was the grass, the jock straps, shoes, wherever. So I think the entire experience was amazing. Of course, that first time in Jacksonville was the best because that was my first, opportunity to get in the NFL. But overall, just the entire experience of being able to collect things. So I just collected everything, like I said, jock straps, grass, spikes from cleats. So I have a lot of stuff that I collected while I was playing.
What advice would you share with somebody who wants to be a player in the NFL, something that they might not be thinking about, maybe the unglamorous side of it?
I would definitely say, be as versatile as possible. Don't be locked into one thing you can do. Once again, if you're on the low end tier, special teams is going to be the most important, position for you to be in because the more you can do, because there's only 53 men on the active roster. So you have 11 starters on offense, defense. That's 22 guys. Positions already taken in the backup. So you want to see how you can fit in that backup role, and the best way you can do that is playing special teams. So I tell guys all the time, no matter if you're the number one wide out in college and you get drafted, low, figure out how to play special teams. I was a wedge buster, at 185 pounds. But if you want to stay on the roster, you have to figure out how can you be versatile and what value do you bring to the team.
In your time in the NFL, who were some of the mentors and leaders that you were able to connect with, whether those were coaches or fellow players?
Yeah. The neat part about the NFL is, no matter where you're drafted at, whether you're the low end on the pole or the high end on the pole, there's a certain amount of respect for everyone because everyone knows how hard you had to work to get there. Like there's no nepotism in NFL as far as like players go. Like, no one can have a friend of a friend or a family member that can get them in there. You have to be legitimately good because once again, the contracts aren't guaranteed. So with that being said, there's a lot of camaraderie. So I learned a lot from a lot of guys in different aspects, in different areas of the NFL. Once again, because I was undrafted, they never treated me any different than if I was a first round draft pick. Even though I didn't have the money to pay for anything, but other than that, even to down to them often let me drive their cars, like which I didn't do it, but I think they each other respect each other because they know how hard you work to get there. They know that you got there purely off hard work and your talent and nothing else. So I think I learned a lot from a lot of people just because of that camaraderie we have in the NFL.
When did you know, or how did you know that it was time to move on to the post football chapter of your life?
My first day in Jacksonville, my first day of practice. You go out there and you go to practice, and as soon as practice is over, this is literally we're in mini camp, so we haven't even got to training camp yet. We're in mini camp, rookie mini camp, and after rookie mini camp, they released four guys, and it's like, oh wow, and one of them was a guy that was locker right next to mine. I was like, wow, this goes quick. So you know, you don't no one did anything glaringly wrong out there, so you didn't see like, okay, I understand why he got cut. Who knows why those guys got cut? Because no one, like I said, no one did anything glaringly wrong that you could say, okay, he's not good enough. Everyone looked great out there, and he gets cut. So then you go through that, and then you get into training camp, and you get into off-season workouts, and guys are constantly getting cut. So immediately then, I did the ultimate sin of an athlete. I started thinking about plan B. And that's something that, coaches try to tell you not to do is you gotta stay focused on one thing. But immediately when I saw guys getting cut like that, I was like, man, I gotta figure out a plan B. I'm gonna work really hard to be a part of this and give everything I got, but I need a backup. So I would say after my first day of practice, I realized that I need to start planning my retirement.
Well, we're here with Corey Parchman. You're a prime example of someone who's made the most of your post playing career, and that includes being the CEO of Corpar Holdings. Tell us more about Corpar Holdings.
Yeah, so Corpas Holdings, we acquire small businesses between $2 million and $4 million. It kind of vamped out of just once again seeing the writing on the wall, like I just explained before. You see the writing on the wall in NFL or how I need to pivot. What's next. You don't want to get stuck. So I've been in real estate. That's where I started at in my career. So I've been in real estate since 2004 up until now, and I'm still in it for the most part. But what I'm seeing is development side. What we do is it was slowing down. So we build affordable housing, which is called workforce housing. But that market has been slowing down for probably the last 5 years. And with that being said, we realized that we had to pivot. We could stay in it, but also add another arm to our development company. So that's when we started acquiring small businesses, mostly from baby boomers that are looking to retire.
Now, you majored in educational psychology at Ball State University. So, where did you develop your knowledge and your confidence in the area of business?
So I think that just like anything else, when you see something you like, you kind of like you do the work you study. I think that what Ball State did for me was gave me the framework on how to study, how to do research, how to put systems and processes together. So even though I didn't go in education, because my degree was in teaching, I wanted to be a teacher, but the NFL paid a little bit more, so I went the NFL route. But the framework that the school, the education college gave me was one of those things with transferable skills. So I just transferred those same skills I learned in education into business and kind of just took off from there.
In business, what has been the best risk that you've taken that has ultimately paid off?
I think the best risk I've taken is the risk of just trying in the first place. I think one of my, and you probably get this, one of the worst deals I ever done, awful deal, but I learned so much from it. I was going to be the guy who comes back and save my neighborhood. So I bought 4.5 acres in my old neighborhood. I was going to build affordable houses in my old neighborhood. Didn't know what I was doing, but I had a dream and a goal. The deal ended up falling through for a number of reasons. Probably everything that you can do wrong in a development, I did wrong, and I learned so much from that experience. So I would say the biggest thing I've done was making a mistake early, and then learn from the mistake, and then moving forward.
Now, you said a minute ago that you did not go into education, but you did found the Mini Men Pre-K Leadership Academy in Indianapolis. Tell us what makes Mini Men Academy so special.
Yeah, so Mini Men's an all boys preschool. We serve kids from 3 to 5 years old. And education is so important to me. And what I would do is I'd often go back to schools and volunteer. And I saw kids were struggling in elementary school. So I talked to some of the teachers. They said, hey, the biggest problem is a lot of these kids come out of preschool not ready for kindergarten. And what happens is you have a teacher that spends the entire year teaching preschool material in kindergarten. And those same kids get pushed into first grade. Well, that first grade teacher's not teaching first grade stuff, they're teaching kindergarten stuff. So these kids are constantly behind. So I want to start a preschool to kind of give them that push to when they go to kindergarten, they're ready to go, they're ready to soar. Then also, I wanted to, some of these kids don't have any male role models. I lost my dad when I was 9 years old, and my dad was my best friend. He was my football coach, my baseball coach. I really missed that. So I wanted to make sure these boys had some positive male role models in their life. So I bring in male role models to talk to the kids and kind of be, some mentors to them at an early age.
Yeah, and I'm curious about those mentors who you bring in and share their stories with the students. What are some of the common messages that they share?
Well, I really focus on bringing in non-athletes. I think that I'm the only one I need to see, right? No, just kidding. But no, I want to make sure that they're exposed to as many things as possible. I think when I was growing up, a lot of my friends were only exposed to a few things, which was sports, and that's great. And it did amazing thing for me. And if any kid wants to play sports, that's great. But I also want to show other options. So I like to bring in people with other professions just to open their eyes up to see what else is out there. But one of the things you kind of see the most is like, how, these mentors get just as much out of it as the kids do. And when you see like these kids asking questions at 3, 4, 5 years old, we're just like kind of just planting a seed there. And we won't see the results of it. I'll probably be gone by then. But what's neat is, my oldest kids are now 15 years old. So my first class I ever had, they're now 15, and to see those seeds planted back then and see them now at 15, 16 years old is amazing to see like what we started. So it's been going pretty good.
That's really cool. And as a former school principal myself, I can also say firsthand, that when bringing someone in to share their story and share their message with students, yeah, it's absolutely makes their day. They love that opportunity. And I
Yeah.
know at school you mentioned the academic focus. There's also a character development focus too. What are some of the main character development principles that you focus on at Miniman Academy?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things is a social emotional thing, just learning how to share, how to get along, how to handle frustration and anger issues. So, one of the things we really push is like, some of our kids get frustrated sometimes, but how do I manage that frustration and not have an outburst? So it's one of the big things I'm big on is just handling your emotions. At that age, you have big emotions, right? But just figuring out how you handle those emotions and how you network and get along with your friends and become, students. I know that they're young, but you would be surprised how much these kids grasp at a young age. So social and emotional education is really big for us to teach them how to manage frustration, how to manage disappointment, and how to manage, working with others and playing with their friends.
So something you and I have in common is that we've both served as school leaders, but one thing I can't say is that I've never started a school from scratch the way that you have. What was the most challenging part of starting the academy?
I think the most challenging part was me learning how to be a great leader, making sure I have my message gets across to the teachers. It was easy to sell to the parents my dreams and my thought processes, but I really worked hard on selling that same to the teachers because I knew I had teachers that were really good teachers, but had been teaching, in a certain style for a long time. And here I come, a new guy that's disrupting all of this. So just convincing them that, to believe in my dream and what I was trying to do. So work really hard on that. When I say disruptive, I want to make sure that, we just didn't watch the kids just play and run around all day. We're actually monitoring and helping them out through situations. And we're actually being active with the kids. So that was one of the things I knew I had to really work on because sometimes the misconception of the preschool or daycare is just to run around and watch kids play all day, which that's a big part of it. But there's a certain technique you have to do with that, being very visual, and also having conversations with kids and having real time conversations because a lot of the lessons come in real time. A lot of lessons come when the situation happens right there. And you can talk about things in a book, but when things happen in real life, it connects a little bit better with the kids. So that's why you had to be visual. So when you see those real things happen, you can connect with them and explain to them what's going on.
Now, how has the academy evolved over the years since it was first founded, or has that original plan and vision stayed true?
It's interesting because the thought process was to serve kids in my own neighborhood. But then, once the word get out, a lot of people want to come and, we don't have buses. So people bring their kids. So it's one of those things where I want to keep the organic piece of making sure we serve kids in my neighborhood. But, I also want to give other kids in other neighborhoods opportunities also. So I expanded to what's called pre-K university, which is a boys and girls preschool with the same concept. We just serve boys and girls. So I think it evolved from, one thing to another based on the need. And that's kind of how we've maintained it.
Now, you've alluded to this a little bit already, but just to put a bow on it or to reiterate, what has been the most fulfilling part about founding the academy and leading the academy?
Definitely, you know, I think that my key has always been, you know, giving without expecting any results. So, once again, when you do work with kids that young, you have no clue what the result's going to be, but you do it out of labor or love. I think that oftentimes in football and sports, often get instant gratification. So if I lift weights for 2 weeks and I see my weights go up, or if I run routes, whatever, I see me getting better and better. So you get that instant gratification a lot of times in football, and then you go on the field and score. Well, this right there, you don't have a clue what if it's working or not. You just have faith that what you're doing and keep pushing because you're not going to see those results. So I think that's the biggest thing, that just giving without the expectation of results. And that's kind of like what this whole thing is, a labor of love, because once again, I won't see what most of these kids are doing once they get on. I try my best to keep in touch with as many as possible, but so we've started with 300 kids, so it's impossible to keep in contact with 300 kids. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just to give them a labor of love without expecting any results other than putting in the work.
You just hit the nail on the head in terms of one of the unique parts of being an educator, in that if you do an excellent job and you help your students become successful and independent people the way you want them to, you might not ever know it. They go
No,
on and they
never
do their
know.
own thing, and you might
Yeah,
not know if you did a perfect job.
not at
We're
all.
coming down the stretch here with Corey Parchman, and we'll move to yet another exciting chapter in your career and or in your life. And this has to do with a very personal topic. In
Yeah.
2025, you were invited to CBS Morning Show to share your book, The IVF Playbook for Men. And before we get into the content of the book, I'm curious about just that experience itself of being interviewed live on CBS Morning Show. What were the nerves like in the green room that day?
Well, I really wasn't nervous at all because I've talked about this as my personal story. So, it wasn't anything that I wasn't used to talking about. And I wrote the book, so I was very versed on what I was going to talk about, and they gave me some prep questions. Pause there. I get on stage, and the very first question has nothing to do with what we even talked about or what we even prepped for. So I was throwing a curveball, and not many people can notice that. I think that I luckily did a great job of masking that, but I was so thrown off because that was not the first question we're supposed to ask. So when I got that question, it was like, okay, go. And you kind of like start talking your way through it. But yeah, that was a curveball because nothing we practiced, nothing the pre questions they gave me, none of the thing was not what we did. We got on live on TV. So it was an interesting thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've watched that interview a few times. It's easy to find online, and I mean, it seems smooth from start to finish. So
Yeah.
yeah, you played it off well. Thinking about the content of the book, the IVF Playbook for Men, share why IVF is a topic of interest for you.
Yeah. So, my wife and I experienced IVF for 3.5 years, and that was an interesting part. The book is totally about, just the experience from a male perspective, IVF. There's a ton of material out there for women, which it should be. I mean, my wife, did an amazing job with everything, but there's also that aspect of it. While my wife is dealing with things mentally, physically, and emotionally, as a partner, you're dealing with things emotionally, but you're also trying to make sure you take care of your partner who is doing most of the work. And there's a little bit of guilt there about not doing enough. So the book just talks about from a male perspective on how to take care of your partner, but also take care of yourself. I didn't have anyone to talk to, so that's kind of a thing that I struggle with. So I want to open a book up, open a network up of men who may be going through IVF themselves and have somebody to talk to. And that's kind of what the book was about. But then when I got on CBS, they focused on male infertility. And I was like, oh, that's only maybe 3% of the book, but that's where they went. So when I get on there, it's like, what about male infertility? I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. So, but the book is 99% about just being a great partner and taking care of yourself through the IVF process. And we went through it for 3.5, 4 years, had many disappointing moments, a lot of unknown. And the book just talks about, how to manage your feelings and also be okay with asking questions. That was one thing I struggled with at the doctor's office, asking questions because you get so much thrown at you at one time. And it's like, well, what do I ask? Then you go home and Google stuff and it could, Google could tell you anything. So it's best to ask the doctor those things in real time. So the book talks about just being able to communicate with your partner, with the doctors, and also with friends and family.
If you're willing to share during that 3.5 year IVF journey, do you remember when it really felt like the most discouraging time and a time where maybe you were considering not trying another cycle?
Yeah. So, and once again, going into you're optimistic, you do the transfer, and then 14 days later you hear that you're pregnant. So initially, that's where we thought how the process is going to go. So once you do the transfer, 14 days later, do a blood test to see if you're pregnant or not. So the first time we go through that, it was like a shocker. Like, well, what do you mean she's not pregnant? And then we do it again. It's like, what do you mean she's not pregnant? And we do it again, it's like, what do you mean she's not pregnant? So I think every time we went through a transfer, you're very, very, very optimistic and hopeful. But then you find yourself on the other end, like disappointment. So then you keep doing it again. And you're like, well, I want to be optimistic about this, but I don't want to be let down either. So you try to manage your feelings on both ends. So we went through a total of 6 transfers that were unsuccessful. So I think that as you go on more and more and more, you start to get discouraged about the entire process. And then I told my wife, hey, it's your decision. I mean, it's because you are doing the brunt and this is your body. When you're ready to throw in the towel, I'm right there with you and don't feel guilty about it at all. But she's a trooper and she hung in there. So after the seventh transfer, we were pregnant and we got our son, Corey Jr.
Yeah, so it has a happy ending. Yes, you and your wife, Dr. Alicia Parchman, have a
Yes.
lovely young son. And so tell us about your wife and son.
Yeah, so my wife's a optometrist up here in Carmel. She's an amazing person. It's interesting because she jokes because, she really, really want to be a doctor and she worked really hard to become a doctor. But she was like, I'd rather be a mom. So she kind of transitioned to being a full-time mom, which I appreciate, that one-on-one time that her and my son gets. And he's amazing. He's 15 months now, running around full speed. He's finally like saying words consistently. It's a little bit advanced than I thought it would be. Normally, me being in education, I kind of know the process of when kids start developing words. So he's doing that pretty good already. So it's been pretty good. So it's just come full circle. And it goes back to what we talked about before, just persevering, being an undrafted free agent, persevering through that, being the first person to start my own business and becoming a disaster by my first acquisition but persevering through that. So I think that, a lot of things is about persevering and, just putting your head down and then putting in the work.
Well, that's wonderful. And taking it beyond IVF, just to fatherhood in general, what advice do you have for the dads out there?
Be present. And I was told this before I became a dad. It was, and a guy told me, he said, "Hey, don't keep wishing for the next thing." And he was like, when they're not walking, you say, "I can't wait till they start walking," and they start walking. You say, "I can't wait till they start running," and then you say, "Well, I can't wait." It's like whatever season they're in, be present there. So when they're not walking, be a great holding them. When they're just barely walking, be great in that season. When they start to run. So each, season they're in, just being present and not just looking forward to the next one, which has been pretty much a macrocosm of my life, just being present in the moment. Because I never wanted to look back on anything and be like, remember, I should have done this. That's why, again, I collected so much stuff when I was in the NFL because I'm like, I don't know when I'm gonna be here. So, hey, Brett Favre, give me that wristband. Hey, Jerry Rice, give me that headband. Hey, Tim Brown, give me that sock. So it was just being present. So that's why I've been doing it for a while. So it's an easy transition of the dad to be present.
Yeah, it's such a tough balance, an important balance in parenthood of basically every day, certainly having the present in mind, to some extent, yeah, having the future in mind, and then even having the past in mind too, and having all those great memories. As we
Yeah.
wind down here, is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, thank you, Nick, for having me on here. I appreciate it. I know we met prior to it, and kudos to your success, man. I definitely been following you. So and I saw you doing a podcast. I definitely hit the like button. So man, just knowing people are out here just working hard and putting their head down, it's amazing. So congratulations on your success and continued success, and definitely this podcast. But just think that you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on a website, CoreyParchman.com. Look up what we're doing. Like I said, we're acquiring businesses now and I'm teaching people how to buy businesses. There are like 6 million baby boomers that are retiring and don't have a succession plan. A lot of these baby boomers I meet don't have anyone that's going to take over their business. Their kids don't want it, or they don't have any plans. So there's a lot of businesses out here that are available to be purchased. So just working on those things are my focus right now.
Well, thank you for your kind words. And yeah, this podcast, it's just getting off the ground now, and it's been a blast. I just love talking to interesting people and hearing about their journeys and talking a little sports too. So it's
Oh,
been a
oh
lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah, definitely. Appreciate it, Nick. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nick.
In the innovation segment, we discuss innovations, good and bad, and this will be primarily playing rules, but this is a space to discuss innovations of all types in the sports world at all stages of implementation or brainstorming. The innovation to discuss today is a playing rule, and it's been implemented in the United Football League as of 2026. It's the 4-point field goal for any field goal that's made over 60 yards. I'm not a big fan of this idea, but I should preface by saying that I'm not really a big field goal guy anyway. The idea of taking all of the most recognizable and integral players off of the field and then having someone else come onto the field to perform an act that's so drastically different from every other play in the game and deciding the outcome of games like this is not especially exciting or satisfying to me. It's a phenomenon that's unique to football, and I wouldn't say uniquely good. So, anytime that I hear a proposal that would make field goal an even more prominent place in the sport of football, I'm inclined to oppose it. But let's just assume that I like field goals or that I'm even just okay with field goals. Even then, I would oppose the idea of a 4-point field goal. Now, keep in mind that many cases where the 60-yard 4-point field goal would come into play is out of authentic reasons. A team has tried their best to advance the ball as far down the field as they can, and their drive stalled out for whatever reason just past midfield. But even then, it seems a little weird that you would reward a team with the opportunity to get an extra point or an additional point because they failed to advance the ball farther than they did. And my bigger concern is when a 60-yard field goal is made possible through some sort of inauthentic way. A team chose to stall their drive out on their own just past midfield, or they even deliberately lose a few yards to make a 60-yard field goal possible. And that type of anti-aggressiveness would undo so much of the progress that has been made in football and what has made football especially great in the last 10 plus years, that being the aggressiveness that we've seen on fourth down play calling, especially around midfield. Now, to take a step back and look big picture, the analytics movement has had a profound effect on sports in different ways in the 21st century. Looking at baseball, I would say that for several years, analytics actually made baseball less exciting because it instilled this swing for the fences mentality among batters, which greatly increased the percentage of plate appearances that ended in a strikeout or a walk or a home run, and greatly reduced the percentage of plate appearances that ended with a ball actually in play. But baseball is now finally starting to see some of those numbers trend back into a more appealing direction. The analytics movement has absolutely had a profound impact on the sport of basketball too, although it's more of a matter of taste whether you actually prefer this new style of play where teams just fire away from three-point range so much more often than they used to, and where the mid-range jumper has basically become extinct. In football, though, analytics has been great for the sport. Teams finally realized that they were punting way too often on fourth down, even resorting to field goals way too often on fourth down, and that they really should be keeping their eye on the prize of a touchdown as long as is reasonably possible. And what it's led to is teams going for it on fourth down about 60% more often than they did about a decade ago. And going for it is the most exciting of the three options on fourth down. Analytics has made football more exciting. But the 4-point field goal directly works against teams' inclination to go for it on fourth down. It directly works against that progress that the sport of football has made. And so for that reason, I give the 4-point field goal a 0 out of 10 on the good idea scale. Now, someone might see the merit in a 4-point field goal if they regard it as a reward for exceptional kicking, and I think it's being painted that way, but I don't see the 4-point field goal that way. I see it as a bizarre reward for mediocre offense. Teams that are unable or unwilling to advance the ball deeper than about the 42 or 43 yard line getting rewarded with an additional point than teams that continue their drive deeper into their opponent's territory. Now, if you really wanted to create two tiers of point values for field goals, which I don't, but do so in a way that rewards teams for advancing the ball farther down the field, then you could add two more uprights to each crossbar so that the crossbar would then resemble like a dinner fork, where if you make it through the inner uprights, you get 4 points, and if you make it through the outer uprights, it's 3 points, something like that. And while I've been a little bit rough on the United Football League in this segment, I do acknowledge and applaud their willingness to experiment with a rule change like this, which is, in the grand scheme of things, a good thing. And I encourage you to also continue submitting your ideas for innovations in sports. And if you're ready to share it with the world, then you can submit your idea by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. The next to last thing I'll do in this episode is to acknowledge a next to last from the past. In this episode, acknowledge the next to last play from the 1972 gold medal men's basketball game in Munich, pitting the United States against the Soviet Union. The United States, still fielding amateur players in those days, were led by leading scorers Tom Henderson and Dwight Jones, and they were coached by Hank Iba, who had been a legendary coach at Oklahoma State. The United States entered the gold medal game undefeated, and I don't mean they just hadn't lost any games in the 1972 Olympics. I mean that the United States men's basketball team had never lost a game in any Olympics ever, winning every gold medal in all the 7 Olympics where men's basketball was played, and winning every single game along the way, amassing a 63-0 record. Now, this gold medal game was very tight, with the Soviet Union holding a 1-point lead in the final minute before the United States' Doug Collins was fouled on a driving layup attempt with 3 seconds left, and he sank 2 clutch free throws to give the United States the lead 50-49. And that's when things got weird. The Soviet Union immediately inbounded the ball, but the play was whistles dead before it could be carried out all the way, as the Soviet coach pled and the officials agreed that he was trying to call a timeout. So the officials ruled that the court would need to be cleared, and the clock, which had started to run, would need to be reset to 3 seconds. The next attempt to run the play is even weirder, as the Soviets inbounded the ball deep in their own backcourt, which led to a hopeless heave that fell short of the basket, and the United States poured out on the court, celebrating and embracing, thinking that they had won the gold medal. But this particular attempt is the subject of the next to last segment for a reason, because there would be yet again another attempt to run the play after this. The officials ruled that the clock had not been reset properly, and there is evidence to show that the clock read 50 seconds instead of 3 seconds when that second attempt to run the play was started. and they ruled that the court needed to be cleared yet again to run the play yet again. And on that third and final attempt, the Soviets executed a long pass to Alexander Belov, who made what turned out to be an easy underneath layup at the buzzer to win the game and the gold medal. In the short term, the United States lodged a formal protest of the game, which was overruled 3-2, and they refused to accept their silver medals at the medal ceremony. But this game might have had long-term implications too. The United States did go on to win the gold medal in the next two Olympics where they participated, but they settled for a disappointing bronze in 1988. And this disappointing performance brought back the heartbreak of 1972, and it was the final straw for the practice of fielding amateur players. So in 1992, the United States fielded its best team, and arguably the most famous team to ever play in any event, in any sport, and that's the Dream Team, which was made up of many superstars from the NBA. Now that team went on to win the gold medal easily, winning every game by at least 32 points, and more importantly, sparking a worldwide fascination with the sport of basketball. And it also revolutionized the Olympics as a whole, normalizing the practice of fielding professional athletes. A lot changed for the Soviet Union, too, between 1988, when they won their second gold medal, and 1992. But that change is probably better explained in a history book than a sports podcast. The very last thing I'd like to do in this episode is to thank you for your engagement with Sports Rule Pod. Remember, if you have an idea for a sports rule change or innovation and you're ready to share it with the world, you can send that by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. Like or subscribe wherever you find the podcast, and look for Season 1 episodes to be released every 2 weeks on Friday mornings. See you next time.